Hi everyone, welcome back. We'll just wait for a few more people to join us.
Hello, hello.
I hope you all had a good half-term break. If you did have a break, we're able to make the most of it.
Oh, is that Ruth, Fuel Poverty Action Ruth down there? Ah, she's muted. Hello, Ruth. We were talking about fuel poverty action today, actually. Very topical you've appeared. Thank you.
Hi, Alex. Good to see you. What were you saying about us?
We were saying about who we wanted to actually support and work with rather than people that say they do fuel poverty. And you were in the ones that do stuff, not the ones that say they do stuff and they kind of, a bit rubbish. I'm obviously not going to say on that call who I thought was in that camp.
No.
Because we're all about the positive energy here. Thank you.
Yes. No,
Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. I think we will go ahead and get started, and we'll let the other people slide in as they go. So for those of you that have been here before, welcome back. This is our third session of our How to Green Your Home Through Deep Energy Efficiency Retrofit webinar as part of our Future Fit Homes project. So I will go ahead and get started, but it is worth saying that before we do, this webinar is being recorded. So if you're wanting to not have your name and your video in the recording, then please switch your video off and change your name. And if you wouldn't mind all muting your microphones as well, that would be really handy just to help us manage the number of people that are joining us tonight. You can go ahead and drop questions in the chat. Feel free to have a little chit chat in the chat as well. But yeah, I think we'll jump straight into it this time. So as I said, this is week 3. I hope you all had a good break last week. We took it as sort of a half term and had a little rest and hopefully a little bit of time to reflect. Maybe some of you have also started turning your heating on in the past few weeks and you're realizing actually I do need to retrofit my home for energy efficiency because it's probably not cold enough yet for heating to go on. But yeah, so as I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded. You can watch the recordings on our website afterwards, and you will be sent a link to that along with the presentation slides. Big thank you for everyone that's donated towards the course so far. It's been a huge, huge help. And all of that money is going into our fuel poverty work, which I'll touch upon a little bit later. But this year, because of coronavirus, we've actually extended our fuel poverty work all throughout the whole of the year, and it usually only goes on in winter. So all the donations that we get are a really big help. And of course, thanks to the big lottery for paying for our speakers to come and join us. It's been great to hear from our previous 2 guest speakers, and I'm very excited for who we have on today, and I'm sure you will be as well. So just a little bit about me. I'm Nadia, and if you haven't come across before, I'm a project manager and a non-exec director at Celsey. My background is kind of in energy policy, but also in very much grounded in community energy. And I've previously worked on energy in buildings. I wrote a briefing that went to government about the new standards that are coming in 2025. And advise them that they should make them as eco-friendly and as green as possible through a number of measures, including energy efficiency. I've managed to pick up a few awards along the way, and especially being part of Celsey has helped me on that forefront. So that's been a lot of fun. But if you need to get in touch, you can contact me at nadia@celsey.org.uk. And if you have any questions or anything that you want to find out a little bit more about, go ahead and drop me an email on there. So just to recap what we've looked at in the previous weeks of the course, we had our first sessions in October, looking at the basics of energy efficiency and building fabric. And then the week after, we went a little bit deeper into sustainable building, what different models there are, and what kinds of insulation you might be looking at and what they mean for you. Then we had our half-term break. And we also, in those 2 weeks, really looked at the details of the Green Homes Grant and how you can apply for that, which we'll also be touching on a little bit today, although not as much. So if you do want key information on the Green Homes Grant, do go ahead and check out the recordings. But today we are looking at a full home retrofit, what it's like to experience that as someone who's doing it themselves. But we're also going to look at what assistance you can get along the way, where you can seek out advice, and what organisations there are, especially in South East London, that are involved in this space. Next week, we have our final session, I'm afraid to say, which will be focusing on how you can utilise renewable energy to future fit your home. So that's looking at things like solar panels, heat pumps, electric vehicle chargers and more. And we're going to talk about how the home can become sort of a mini power station in essence and help support the rest of the decarbonisation efforts of the UK. But for today's agenda, the first thing we'll be looking at is sort of about Future Fit Homes and what we're looking to offer through it, and when we're launching and when we'll be able to finally get the prices to you and finally let you book the services, which I know a lot of people have been emailing me about, and honestly I'm just as sort of eager to get it started as you guys are. Then we'll go into a little bit more detail about the home retrofit plan, and we're using a partner called EcoFurb to bring you a basic plan, which I'll touch upon a bit later. Also, what kind of support we can give in terms of helping you to find contractors and helping you manage that process through retrofit coordination. So as I've said before, we are part of a co-op called Retrofit Works, which you'll find out a little bit more about through a video a bit later. Then we'll go on to question and answers for a short period. And after we do that, we are going to be passing on to Harry Paticas, who is going to tell us about his experience of a full home retrofit and doing it all himself, and also how he works with the organisation that he set up called Retrofit Action For Tomorrow to raise awareness about energy efficiency and decarbonising buildings in schools. And then you can have your questions answered through the Q&A right at the end. And if you just drop those questions in the chat, then we'll get to them that way, I think. So what are you going to get out of today? Well, by the end of the day, or by the end of the session, it's not a full day, you'll be familiar with how you can make your own basic house plan and what you need to consider, and a tool that we are working with EcoFurb to offer you for that house plan. You'll be able to understand what exactly Retrofit Works is and what sort of different methods you can use to find contractors, know where you can get support throughout your journey, and understand what retrofit means from a homeowner's perspective or from someone's perspective who is going to be living in the home that is retrofitted. So really the practicalities of what it looks like. And of course, we're going to find out how RAFT have been raising awareness, have a look at a few of the projects they've worked on, and you'll have your questions answered. And if we don't get to them in the session today, please do shoot them over via email, and we will get to them when we can. So I thought it would just be a good idea for those of you that aren't too familiar with us, or for those of you that are new to the webinars today, to give you a bit of background about who we are and what we do. So CELSI was set up about 5.5, 6 years ago now. And Alex, who's online putting her thumbs up, was one of the co-founders. But it was set up by a group of local residents to Greenwich and Lewisham. And all of them had the vision that we needed a low carbon future where everyone had access to affordable energy to meet their needs, and people have a say in how it's produced. So we are a cooperative, and we're registered as a community benefit society, which means we're a non-profit. We've helped install solar on over 14 sites now across Lewisham and Greenwich, and those include schools, community centres, leisure centres. And one of our core areas is, of course, offering free and impartial advice to people that are having to choose between sort of heating their homes, actually finding the money to feed themselves as well, because the fuel poverty rates across Southeast London are one of the worst across Europe, and it's really not something that we should be seeing in London. So all of our efforts and all of our revenue goes into tackling that at the minute. And of course, we're powered by a wonderful, wonderful team of volunteers, and now a small but growing staff team as well. So Future Fit Homes is a new project that CELSI is launching, and it's been sort of in the trial phase for a little while now. But the aim of it is to create a greener and cleaner London. We have trained domestic energy advisors who have come to us from outside, or who we've actually trained ourselves. And we're also members of the cooperative Retrofit Works, which I was talking about earlier, which is a cooperative of contractors who are working to high standards, to sort of trusted and vetted levels, and are really working for the decarbonisation of buildings across London. And of course, all surpluses from the Future Fit Homes project go back into that fuel poverty work that I was talking about earlier. So I know that a lot of the people that have been emailing me from the previous sessions want more information about what services we're offering, and I'm glad to say today that I can actually tell you what those are in a good amount of detail. Please don't ask me for prices today. I will tell you prices as soon as we launch next week, because they are just being finalized. But yeah, we're almost there. So the first thing is you'll get a free telephone consultation when you first come to us. If you're at the stage where you're just trying to figure out what does a retrofit look like, what you really need to explore, and you're not at the stage yet where you've got a plan in place and you don't know what you. So you'll speak to one of our trained energy advisors for that. And then you'll use the EcoFurb tool to get your basic house plan. And that is a very, very handy tool. And you might have seen, if you've been sort of searching the web for this space, that there are similar tools online, but we do think that the EcoFurb tool has been sort of one of the more detailed tools. And even though it does sort of build your plan based on assumptions about your building, you can then go on and register to have an assigned retrofit coordinator through EcoFurb, and also to go with contractors through EcoFurb. And that at point, that's when your basic plan will become much more of a detailed plan through that method. But if you don't decide to go through that method with the contractors that they have, who are also through Retrofit Works, then you can of course go out and find your own contractors, and you can come back to us for one-to-one ad hoc advice. And that's sort of really a hand-holding service. So if you go out and you get quotes and you want to find out if the quotes are really high or really low, or if there are things that you're worried about you haven't really thought of within those, then you can come and get advice for an hourly fee with our retrofit coordinator and with our energy advisors as well. And there are two other bits that we will be offering as well, and those are the thermal imaging surveys. So that's a really cool, it's a really cool report essentially, but it's not a report like a paper report. It's a video of where your house is leaking heat from. And it's very, very good because it can demonstrate all of the little gaps where you might have old insulation that's all bunched up and maybe started to get a little bit wet inside the walls if it wasn't installed properly. And you can see where there hasn't been insulation installed at all. And you can see sort of where you're losing heat. Maybe it's gaps around your windows, maybe it's between the floorboards. But that's a very cool report that we will be able to offer sort of nearer to December time as well, dependent on how lockdown goes. And of course, energy performance certificates. If you're a landlord or if you've recently sold your house, you'll probably have one of these already. But this is a basic certificate that rates your house from A to G on its energy efficiency. And if you're A, you're really good. If you're G, you really need to improve. But it also gives you a few recommendations on what you can improve as well. And that is quite a relatively cheap report to have done on your home that can be given to people that are interested in purchasing it or in renting it. So just to give you a little bit more insight into this basic house plan that we are looking to offer through EcoFurb, this is a completely free online tool. And what you do is you log onto the website and you type in your postcode and you click on your address, and they will give you what they think your house actually looks like. So you can see here, I've actually done it for my own house in Catford. And you can see it's estimated that it's a early 1900s semi-detached house. It thinks I've got 150 millimeters of loft insulation, solid brick walls, etc., etc. And then it will go on to ask you, what are your main priorities? And for some people, it's cutting emissions. For other people, it's reducing the running costs. But for a lot of us, it will be both. And then have you got a budget in mind? £10,000, £20,000, a lot more. It is really up to you, and you can enter your own number there as well. And then it will suggest things that are within your budget to maximize either your carbon savings or your cost savings. So going on from that, what it has recommended for my own home was that I get a room thermostat, and it's given me an estimated cost down there, which is £95, in addition to how many tons of carbon emissions it thinks that I will save from installing that measure. So it's got here a room thermostat. It hasn't got multi-zone heating controls because it's already put the room thermostat in there, and you would only do one or the other. It thinks I should have solar panels, and it thinks I should have a new boiler as well. Probably very accurate, although I did get solar panels installed last week, so just a little bit out of date. But if you go on to update this with your assigned retrofit coordinator, they will obviously come and visit your house. And if you come through CELSI, the intention is that you will actually be able to have a retrofit coordinator that is from the CELSI team as well. when you get to the end of this and you've got all your information, is register for EcoFurb, and you'll have a drop down there where you'll put heard about us through Celsi, and then we will generate sort of a referral fee on that as well, that will go back into supporting this and into supporting our fuel poverty work. So I just thought that to give you an idea about Retrofit Works, I would show you a video because that is probably a much better way of explaining it than I would be able to. So I will just change my screen away from this one. Bear with me one moment. And we will watch the video on Retrofit Works.
There are 27 million homes in the UK, of which a vast percentage are lacking in energy efficiency. They're cold in the winter, hot in the summer, and cost a great deal in energy bills. There are also lots of people.
Nadia, we've lost sound and motion on the video. Have we also lost Nadia?
Perhaps somebody should call her.
Luckily, his... It's one I prepared earlier.
It's because I just joined.
Oh no!
I put a jinx on it. Actually, we've been talking about you, Alex. We've had an Energy meeting.
Oh, that would have changed it as well, probably. Okay. Yeah, Nick, don't worry, no video, no audio. I see you in the chat. She's also not answering her phone. Okay.
Hi guys, apologies for that.
Ah,
I'm back, but I can't seem to have the audio working.
on the
So
video.
actually, I think that I'll send around this video after the session because it will be a bit hard to show you it over Zoom. But yeah, I'll give you some insight into what Retrofit Works is. So essentially, Retrofit Works is a cooperative of both contractors and organisations that are working to raise awareness and to support consumers really on energy efficiency and on being able to retrofit their home or their homes. And everyone that signs up to Retrofit Works is quite highly vetted and quite has to go through a long process to be able to be a member of the cooperative. And of course, because it is a cooperative, people that are involved, organisations that are involved, have a say in how it is run. So we really believe that it is an organisation that has sort of decarbonisation and good consumer, good practice at its heart. So if you were to go and get your plan done, the basic house plan that we talked about earlier, through EcoFurb, and then you were to sign up through EcoFurb, it would be Retrofit Works contractor that would actually carry out your work, and they would sort of tender it out and get the best quote for you, and then they would assign a retrofit coordinator who would be from Celsi to support you go through that work process with them.
Can I add something as well
there are
about Retrofit Works, Nadia?
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So the idea behind Retrofit Works was to basically make it less painful for the average householder to have trusted, vetted, reasonable quotes from quality installers without having to get absolutely how to sort the wheat from the chaff. essentially, and to be a trusted pair of hands to help find that out. So they ideally want to be visible, but their role is as a multi-stakeholder co-op is so that you can get quotes from various different companies who are also members of the co-op who've been vetted, so that then you can have the experience of having a retrofit coordinator, so you're still in control and make the decisions, but you have it explained to you when you need it to, and you know that everyone you're getting a quote from has been vetted and is covered by the Retrofit Works umbrella of quality assurance. It's a multi-stakeholder co-op, but even though you might get a quote for one particular aspect, say you wanted I don't know, an air source heat pump, or you wanted some solid wall insulation, the quotes you get from the members within the co-op, they're all blind. They don't know, there's no price fixing, there's no sort of shenanigans like that. So it's all transparent, but it's to take some of the pain out of the process of going through this, because it's quite complex, as Harry, I'm sure, will attest to. I just wanted to sort of just give a bit of supplementary info there. I'll shut up now.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much, Alex. So yeah, as you rightly mentioned, if you were to go through EcoFurb for the contracted work, then you would sort of have them as your first port of call, but your retrofit coordinator ideally would be through ourselves, and it would probably be Tristan, who is our current staff member, who some of you have dealt with before. And yeah, the contractors would be appointed through or would be members of Retrofit Works. But yeah, there are a few things to note considering timeframes and considering practicalities of what has been going on, especially with lockdown in the past few months. So there are definitely bottlenecks within people that are wanting to apply for the Green Homes grant. A lot of you have already highlighted that you may have been trying to get quotes from people that can do the installs, and that is because a lot of people are, or a lot of the installers are really rushing to get accredited so that they can install measures under the Green Homes grant. Now that is something that will pass, obviously, with a bit of time, but we're not able to say that way. And it's something that is sort of across the whole market at the minute within energy efficiency. Another issue to mention is that, so vouchers are meant to be issued from this month. The government did say that the vouchers would be issued from early November. We haven't seen any come out yet if you have already applied, so do keep waiting. I think they will come out soon. But to apply for the Green Homes grant, you really have to have developed your plan and know what you want to do, and also then found a contractor that you're happy with and who's given you a quote for the work, and then you can actually apply. So if you're going to use the grant, please do get developing your plan as soon as possible and looking for a contractor as soon as possible. My understanding is that if you were to go through the tool that we were going to use, EcoFurb, you would probably have to wait a bit of time before they would be able to get to you, because they are quite oversubscribed. So I'd recommend, if you're looking to do this for the sake of the grant, I would look for your own contractors at the minute. Again, lockdown could make this all a little bit harder, and it could delay things a little bit more. And considering if you do use the grant, your works have to be installed within 3 months, it's already a bit of a short time frame for a lot of the measures to be done. So if you're having external wall insulation, if you're having all your floors taken up, it's going to be a push for time to get it all done within the grant. Having said that, it's not always about the money. As a lot of you have rightly highlighted to me in the chat before, there is strong interest in retrofitting your home, not just because there's grant money out there, but because you think it is the right thing to do, and because you do want to invest in the fabric efficiency of your home. So if that is the case, then yeah, develop a plan, but make sure you get it done properly. Make sure you don't rush for an installer. Make sure you go with someone that you trust, I would say. So in terms of the other CELSI services that we're offering through Future Fit Homes, as I did mention, the thermal imaging surveys or reports will be on offer, but these will be from mid-December onwards. That is partly because of lockdown, but it's also partly because when you do a thermal imaging survey, you really want the temperature outside your house to be a significant amount colder than it is inside your house, so that you can see where it's losing heat exactly. And you're also going to want to close all of the windows up. But if you're having contractors come in to work on your house, you want to have your windows open before they come in because of coronavirus as well. So it's a little bit hard to manage, but mid-December is when we expect to be able to do the surveys from. EPCs you can book within the next from next week. Again, EPCs are something that has to be done in person as well, so it would be something that we have to work out how we can do post lockdown, I suppose, as well. But the one-to-one advice will be available on an hourly rate, as I mentioned. The support you can get through that is looking through quotes from contractors that you found, making changes to your plan if you've decided, actually, you know what, I don't think I want the hassle of taking all my floorboards up and doing underfloor insulation. We can look at how you can actually maximize what you've got left of your budget now to adjust that plan. Checking quality of work that's been done as well. Our advisors can support you with that, and they can really highlight any risks, any things that you might not have thought about. You know, if someone comes to you with a quote, have you asked them, are they going to take all the rubbish away and dispose of it properly, or who is disposing of the rubbish? And it's just little pointers like that for people that have been through this process and have been trained in it. It would come to mind, but it may not come to mind for everyone that's doing this for the first time. So if I think we'll go ahead and jump into the question and answer session for now. We have about, I'm going to say about 5 minutes to do some quick questions, and then I'm going to pass on to Harry. But I will just have a look through the chat. Right, what have we got in terms of questions?
Nadia, no questions have particularly come up in the chat, but maybe if anyone wants to jump in with anything now, if not, bring on Harry.
Wonderful, okay. And yeah, if anyone has any questions that they want to email me, or any issues they want to get in touch about, of course, you can contact me on that email there, nadia@celsi.org.uk. Okay, let's get straight into it. So I am very excited to introduce Harry. He is the co-director of Arboreal Architecture and also founder of the of RAFT, and he has completed his own DIY. He's done it all himself, deep retrofit of his own home, and managed to win an award for doing it as well. So through RAFT, which stands for Retrofit Action For Tomorrow, he educates the next generation on energy efficiency, and he works with schools across Lewisham, which I'm sure he'll be touching on a little bit later, to support them in their mission to decarbonise their buildings. And most recently, he was also awarded an MBE for his work with the community in Bethnal Green. So without further ado, very excited to have you on, Harry, and thank you very much for joining us. And I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to you now.
Okay, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just nod away. So yeah, thank you. It's really great to be talking with and for Celsi, and it's really great to be with you on this lockdown eve. I hope everybody is well, and I hope you're all going to survive the next month okay. So I'm going to give you a really dense talk. It's just my style. I just like to share a lot of information. I talk quite passionately, and I expect lots and lots of questions at the end. Now, just a quick time check. It's 7:08. Are we finishing at 8? Is that the deadline? I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, the intention is to finish
Yeah.
at 8.
Okay.
I think we will probably have a few questions as well. So if we can push questions to maybe 7:50, and then
Okay.
we might have a little bit of time to run over.
Excellent, great. And what I'll do is I'll do a little time check as we go through, and I'll just speed up. I can just talk at length about certain sections, or I can just sort of go through them more quickly. And if people have questions, we can come back to them. Okay, so I'm going to share screen. Can you see that? Can everybody see the screen?
Not yet.
No? Okay. Right, so.
There we go, we got it now.
Okay, is it now full screen? Yeah. Is it full screen now?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yep, excellent, great. Okay. So yeah, so this is a room kind of half finished. So this I'm actually just sitting above that room right now, and I'm going to talk to you about some previous projects. I'm going to talk to you about this house in particular, but I'm also going to reference some other recent retrofit work, both at a very small scale, a little retrofit in Bourneville in Birmingham, and also a much bigger retrofit of a school in Lewisham in Lee. So yeah, I'm an architect and I'm running 2 practices at the moment. Quite challenging time to juggle a lot of work. It's really exciting to have retrofit rising up the agenda and really becoming, as far as I see it, beginning to become a more aspirational thing to do to your home. And I'll talk more about what I mean about that. So this is a little timeline that shows the date of a number of buildings that I have retrofitted in the past or am working on right now. And it's really just to say that you can retrofit a whole range of typologies and ages of building. It's kind of shocking that I'm doing a retrofit of a building built in 2012. It's not that surprising that I'm doing a retrofit of a Walter Siegel house from 1988, given that they're pretty thin and there's a lot of glass. There's not much insulation in the walls. My house is the 1978, and the only building regulation then was 0.6 watts per meter squared Kelvin U value for the loft, which is a bit of insulation in the loft, but nothing else at the time. And then sort of going back in time, you know, there was no insulation generally required under any building regulations. And you do come across interesting bits of straw and things being put into buildings historically, but generally not much. So I think a really important point to share is that a lot of people with listed properties think they can't retrofit them. You can. The one that says 1840 is a deep whole house retrofit where we cut the energy demand, and this is measured demand after 2 years worth of bills, by 80%. So it really is possible to retrofit existing listed buildings. You have to do it sensitively. You have to work through conservation officer concerns, and you know it is quite a bit of consultancy work, but it really is possible. So these are just a few examples of projects that I have completed with Arboreal Architecture. This is an 1840 4-story semi-detached house. And we massively reduced the space heat demand. Space heat demand is the amount of energy used for heating through the year. And the metric we use is kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. And we use the Passivhaus methodology. The Passivhaus methodology and the tool which we use is called PHPP, the Passivhaus Planning Package. It's incredibly accurate and very, very accurate with retrofit as well. A lot of people think it's really more just for new build, but actually it's also a very accurate tool for retrofit. So we also reduced the air leakage of the house from 10 down to 2.1, so a pretty significant decrease. This is actually my mum's house. This is a 1930s semi-detached cavity wall house in Brockenhurst in the New Forest. So this was all done under permitted development, new windows, an extension, and we call that the Chinese hat, that roof over the extension. And that was also designed and measured data achieves the AECB silver standard, also about a 70% decrease in space heat demand, the amount of energy required for heating. But we didn't go quite as deep on the air tightness, so we didn't tape all the joist ends to the walls, which is quite a detailed piece of work, quite invasive. So we experimented there and said, what if we just relax on a few little parts of the air tightness measures, and found that actually it was maybe equating to about 1 air change per hour. So this is a mid-terrace house, Victorian, so very, very early 20th century, 1901, mid-terraced house in a conservation area. So this has new triple glazed windows at the front. So you can do that in a conservation area. They're triple glazed, they have matching details to the other windows. I don't think anybody can tell that there's any difference. If anything, I think that the secondary glazing that conservation officers usually ask for is actually a little bit more invasive, because what it does is it creates a double reflection. So you actually start to see funny patterns of mullions on the windows. So, we've done both. So that is way lower. That's about half the space heat demand of the previous buildings, but that's because we met the Passivhaus standard for retrofit, which is called ENERFIT. And I think you've heard about that from James Traynor earlier in the series. And this was a battle to get down to 1 air change per hour. You often hear of stories of people saying, oh yeah, we got this fantastic air tightness value. Well, I can say it's hard work getting to 1 when you've got chimneys and floors and voids and stairs on walls, quite complicated. We've also done a rather elegant building retrofit near St. Paul's Cathedral. It's got 2 stories below ground and a passage that runs through it, and it's got complex stone and steel, cast iron, brick, like really quite hair-raising details that we have to get right. So possibly my most complicated details ever have been on that building. And that is a similar level to the semi-detached retrofit I did for my mum. And here we are at my house. So we are facing, can you see my cursor, Alex? If you just nod your head, if you can see me circling the window. Alex, can you nod your head? No? Okay, thanks, Pamela. I can see your thumbs up. So I'm just in there. And this is a mid-terraced house in Lewisham. It's in Honor Oak, just off One Tree Hill. There's a little bit of the story here, because I used to live in a tower block in Bethnal Green, and I tried to retrofit all the windows to triple glazed windows and tried to do something great to the tower block, and I just came across barrier after barrier after barrier, and just thought, I need to get myself a freehold. I've got to be master of my own destiny, and better, do exactly the works that I want to do. So what happened is we were about to buy somewhere, but we ended up getting gazumped by the vendor in there, sort of constantly rising the price when we'd already agreed a price, as a lot of people experience. And we sort of ended up with this house because we had some money and we wanted to buy. And so we ended up with a house that was actually more expensive. So we ended up with a much lower budget. So I'm telling you this story because actually that, you know, because it's sort of real and it's what we all go through. And we ended up really not having that much. And so that's really how I ended up doing so much of the work myself, which has actually been a rather great turn of events. And I've learned a huge amount in the process. There's a little story there that Leylandii tree you can see behind the house. I actually got approval that that would be cut down by, it's in the neighbour's garden. It was in the neighbour's garden. There are two, one at the back and one halfway along. So it's blocking the light from the kitchen window at the back. And I actually got approval to get it cut down as a condition of sale. But you'll be pleased to hear that I got it cut into 3 2.6 metre lengths. I then got a mobile chainsaw in, and then I air dried it for 3 years. And during lockdown, I built a beautiful deck in the back garden. So the tree moved about 3 meters and is now a rather lovely deck. So this is an aerial view looking down on the house, and amazingly, Google caught the moment that the cavity wall insulation truck arrived outside our house to put the cavity wall insulation. So, so that's the truck there. So that was quite fortuitous, quite a nice way of proving that the truck did arrive. So we're on the lee of a hill, and so we have quite low. Having lived on Sydenham Hill in a single glazed, very leaky house, I can say that, you know, the location of your house in relation to exposure of wind is actually quite a significant factor in terms of how much heat loss you're going to lose through natural leakage through the building fabric. And these percentages of total heat loss really could vary as much as 5 to 30%. So if you're very exposed and you have a very leaky fabric, you really could lose a massive amount of heat. And we've also got, given that we're just off south, we've got very good exposure. I've written relatively good, I'd say very good, really, exposure to useful solar gains. Now, what we mean by useful solar gains is the low winter sun warming the house for free during the winter, during the heating season. So the more sun you can get during that period, the less heating you need to add to the house. And if you have triple glazed windows facing south that are of a certain size, I'm going to put that little caveat in, triple glazed windows can be a net gain of heat over the year. Yeah, so that's during the heating season. So that's why triple glazed windows are so great, and it's why generally I advocate that, you know, don't put in new double glazed windows because you're already behind the times. So here's a slightly more detailed photograph, a close-up of the building. Now it's easy to say, oh, it's a mid-terrace, okay, two-party walls, quite straightforward. Actually, there's lots of little quirks to this. You can see that there's a step that the property is shifted back from its neighbour, but there's also a step in height, so the neighbour is actually lower than our property. So there are lots of little thermal bridges and heat loss areas on our first floor high up on the wall, so we're losing heat into the neighbour's loft. And there's also heat loss at the back where the end of the building sticks out. So it's a 1978 mid-terrace, and TFA stands for treated floor area. That's is the Passivhaus way of describing area. So we're 90 before the works, we'll be 97 after, because we're going to convert that garage into a usable space. So there's 3 stories. It was in a poor decorative state. The neighbouring house is lower and staggered, and as I said earlier, the only building regulation was for a little bit of loft insulation. So I want to labour this point, and I want you to all go away from my talk and think about this concept of retrofit ready works. With grants around, with a desire to reduce our carbon footprint, with a desire to do the eco thing, I think a lot of people oversee the importance of looking after your building, just the basics. So I think that before you think about insulation and all the other stuff, you need to think about how robust is your building now. You know, what needs repair. People don't really like repairing their buildings. It's not, we don't seem to have a very strong culture of really looking after our buildings. And you know, it's very easy to leave stuff. And for example, that little bit there on our neighbour's house, the mortar is now quite old. It's 42 years old, and it's actually going quite friable. And we're going to be getting solar panels, and when we do, we're going to take off all those ridge tiles and rebed them with a new fresh mortar, because I know that is going. And so there's lots of these little moments where we really do need to think about and we need to care about. And so I just want you to all go away valuing the way lead is dressed into a wall, how good the rainwater goods are, whether they've been cleaned, whether your drains are being cleaned. All those kinds of things are really, really important, because as you've probably learned over the last few weeks, if your insulation gets wet, well, then it loses a very large proportion of its heat retaining capacity, and it can lead to all sorts of unintended consequences and moisture buildup. So what the Retrofit Ready works we did were some minor repairs to the roof, a little bit of lead work repairs, a few hung tiles and missing. So we did those works first. And then we also stripped out a number of layers on the inside, and there was asbestos in the house, and I won't go into detail about it because I know it was been mentioned in previous talks, but very, very important to get an asbestos survey and to know whether you have any in the house. So this isn't my house, but this is the kind of piece of work and kind of forensic analysis that I think should be done for Retrofit Works. If you're going to do a really deep retrofit, a whole house retrofit, I think you need to understand the building as a whole. And so this has some comments in black and some comments in blue, and the comments in blue are moisture related comments. And they just flag up a series of potential issues that need to be addressed. And then this is a section of that same project. This is actually the Bourneville retrofit project I mentioned earlier on. So this just shows a preliminary retrofit strategy for the house. And it's indicative, it's a section that shows where insulation will go, roughly how thick it might be, where we might put it, where difficult junctions are likely to be. And, you know, just as a simple thing such as a porch, it's actually quite a challenge. You know, it's quite easy to sort of wrap a box, but a porch actually needs to be insulated on the underside, and then it needs the wall to the inner room also needs to be insulated. So you need to really think it through, and you need to think through junctions and connectivities. So, you know, I think floor to wall and wall to roof insulation details really need a lot of thought. So back to my house, this is what the Passivhaus verification page looks like. And these are the retrofit steps that we've carried out on the house. So the existing house had a space heat demand of 220 kilowatt hours per square per year. And then I divided that into a series of really 4 key steps, really 3 key, so 3 key steps really. So it's number 2, 3, and 4. So 5 is the addition of PV. And it's very, very heartening to know that after having completed step 3, our measured energy is actually lower than what was predicted by the HPP. So you might have all heard of the word performance gap, the phrase the performance gap, and it's very, very common that buildings are designed to do one thing and they actually perform a whole lot worse. And I remember attending an AECB conference a couple of years ago at Oxford Brookes, where the director of estates of Oxford University were talking about their performance gap, and it was something like 200% on buildings built since 1950. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a kind of shocking amount. So, you know, you can imagine they have all these high profile designers and engineers working away, and unfortunately they haven't managed to deliver buildings that perform as they were expected. So this is very great. This is really great to see that it's performing better than expected. So this is a series, these are the 3 floor plans of the ground floor, first floor and second floor, and there's color coding to indicate where the insulation is going to go, where the air tightness line is, and really the general strategy is top down and front then back. That's the kind of general way we divided it up. And I just thought I'd show you the living room. So the living room is on the first floor, and I just wanted to share the fact that we've got an odd wall. we've got block work, but then we've got this really weird micro cavity. It's a sort of thin little slot that just runs up the building. And then on the other side, we've got a cavity that kind of runs all the way through. So what we've done is we've actually, at the back, there is a proper cavity. It's a normal cavity wall, but at the front it's different. And I'm saying this for 2 reasons. First reason is to make you all aware that as much as you might think you know what your building's doing, or even your standard building assessor, there's always going to be little quirks. And I think those quirks do need to be picked up. And if they're not picked up by you or an assessor or an architect, then they definitely should be picked up by the builder during works on site. And obviously I've had the privilege of being able to drill into walls and when I want, and investigate you know, the building. But it's just worth noting that there is always a quirk. You know, I thought I knew Victorian buildings, but you know, now I know not to rely on previous knowledge, because you often come across something a bit unexpected or a bit unusual. And then the other thing I want to mention is that where an external wall meets a party wall, sometimes cavities carry all the way through across, but usually not. Very often the wall goes all the way to the outside. So if we were to insulate just here, just to make sure, can you see my cursor? Can people nod? Pamela? Yep, thank you. So you do get heat loss through there, and that becomes a thermal bridge. And so there's a sort of general feeling that you should insulate inwards by about 990 centimeters or 1.2 meters. In my case, I didn't. I actually just put in the size of one of our cork boards, which is the size of the board, and I decided to just do 600 millimeters, so 0.6 meters, and I found that more than adequate. I've been checking it with a digital thermometer when it's been freezing outside and looking at temperature differences, and I found that is actually perfectly adequate, and that's 40 millimeters of cork on the wall in some places and 20 millimeters in others, and both work just fine. So I just thought I'd mention that you do need to think about these reveals. So where that window is set into the wall and where you see that the wall returns, you have a reveal there. If you don't insulate that reveal, you get masses of heat loss through those reveals. So it's really important to think about that as well. So here's a section that shows the insulation in the loft, and insulation on the front of the house, and then on the back, and then on the ground floor. And in the garage, the concrete slab is much lower, so we're actually going to put a bit more insulation in there to bring the floor levels up with internal floor levels. So this is an interesting document that I think I've only ever seen on my project. I've never seen anybody else's before, and I think it's because it's quite difficult. It's quite complicated to fill out, but it's actually a really useful tool, and it actually triggered a series of thoughts for me, which I'll share in the next slide. But basically, this is part of the Passivhaus step-by-step retrofit process. What it says is, what are your key building elements? What are their ages? When are you likely to need to maintain them? And when are you likely to need to replace them? And you know, it's a very interesting exercise to think about buildings in time, to not just think about it as a static thing now and just be projecting forward, but to also think about the deeper time. So that got me thinking. And so I did this little sketch last year, June last year. And I actually thought, well, let's think about a building and carbon in time. So this is actually a full carbon history of the house in Bourneville. And here on the left, you've got the CO2 emissions of the actual production of the house. And this is also thinking about, well, how was it heated? So you've got coal, timber, and coke. You had gas lighting. We can see the original gas lighting pipework. And then we know that gas cooking probably started around 1925. First gas boilers came in 1960s, and they probably were 15, 20 odd years each go. So this is probably on its fourth boiler already. And of course, we've got this dashed line, which is this big moment now of like, well, what are we going to do next? And I think we all know that we're in absolutely dire trouble as a planet. It's way worse than any of us can even comprehend, is my view, and we have to do really everything we can. And I think that because we all have to do anything we can, I get very worried, because I suddenly think that everybody rushes to solutions, and it's also quite complicated. It's not, doing a retrofit isn't just about throwing your money and getting the best products that are all going to give you low operational carbon, so low carbon in use. We also have to think about low embodied carbon of the measures that we're putting in. And it doesn't make sense to burn masses and masses of carbon to then have a low operational carbon. We need to be thinking about both of them. So I'm really sorry if that makes people think, oh my God, this is so complicated. But I think we do need to be aware that we have to think about, we have to hold this notion that we're releasing carbon into this atmosphere, and that what are we, 413 parts per million at Mauna Loa in Hawaii, which is where they measure carbon dioxide. That number is inexorably going up, and you look at the curves and it's really terrifying. And so, everything we do is going to have some carbon impact. So I just think we do need to remember to be responsible about the decisions we make. So what I wanted to do, so I had this thing, and this is like a sketch, yeah? It was like me sort of guessing, but then I tried to actually quantify it properly. So I thought, okay, well, how many times did they replace the kitchen? How many times did they replace the windows? And we actually measured the full carbon history and actually got a proper quantified graph of that. I don't have time to go into detail on it, but it was a lot of fun to do, and it did help give this sort of deeper history feeling about buildings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about interrelation. So there are a number of retrofit measures that we need to think about that have impacts on other measures. So, for example, let's say I want to install a mechanical ventilation with heat recovery unit. Well, if I'm going to put one on the wall, I need to make sure that, because I've got the ducts going through the wall, really I want to insulate that wall first. So I want to get the insulation on before I put the mechanical ventilation in, because the setting out might not work. And I don't know whether any of you have seen, you see, I'm always going to retrofit talks and seeing examples of worst practice, but when people pull out slides of worst practice and you start seeing external wall insulations that are staggering around a porch that they didn't bother moving, or a gas pipe that was coming in and nobody coordinated moving the gas pipe so that you could insulate behind it. You see all this stuff and it's all horrendous, and they're all thermal bridges and they're all points of moisture ingress. So we do need to think carefully about the interrelationship between different elements. We've installed mechanical ventilation with heat recovery in the house. So it's a machine that is about the size of a washing machine. It's basically a piece of magic. It provides wonderful air quality. It filters the air coming in, and it's incredibly efficient. I think something like 93% efficient. It's kind of hard to comprehend how well it works. So if it's 0 degrees outside and it's 20 degrees inside, you can be extracting the warm, moist air from your house with carbon dioxide in it, because you've been breathing. And you can extract that from your wet rooms, your kitchen, bathroom, toilet, and then you can supply fresh air that is pulled in from the outside, filtered, and it goes through the bottom of the machine where there's basically a heat exchanger. And basically it's a plenum, it's air passes through. It doesn't mix with the air going out, but the air going out passes by the air coming in, and it transfers about 93% of the heat. So it can be 0 degrees outside. You can be basically supplying fresh, oxygenated, filtered air at about 19 degrees without heating it. So you just pull fresh air in. So it's a very good system. It's very simple and very robust. And there's different ways of setting it out. There's different ways of supplying the air. There's basically a branch system. There are other ways, but branch and radial. And this is a radial system. So these are a whole series of small pipes, 70 millimeters diameter, that I decided on because I fitted it actually. My wife helped me lift it onto the wall. And we did it all from scratch. So I drilled all the holes. I worked out how it was where we were gonna fish it through into what room and where it was gonna go. It was fun doing and relatively easy actually. I got a little bit of help from my son. This is him talking to his mum in the garage. And now it's in, and we've got a really great quality of air in the house. It's there's a vent above my head that's gradually pulling in fresh air now, and I can say that the carbon dioxide is below 750. I've got a carbon dioxide monitor just here next to me, because I'm always measuring these things, and it's a real pleasure. This is important. I got my son quite involved in this, and I got him to do posters of all the different things we did on the house. So I thought his layout of the pipework was pretty priceless here in the middle. I thought he did a great job there. And this is him pointing to the fresh air coming in. What happened, which is really nice, was that he took these posters into school, and his class teacher got him to present them to the class. So we had this really nice bit of sharing where he could talk about stuff he's doing at home, and his classmates could learn a bit about it. And on MVHR, that's the bottom is a fresh filter, and the top is a filter that's been in for a couple of months. And it's kind of interesting to see just how much stuff we're pulling in from the outside. There's a whole load of dust there. And I do know that there's a project taking place now where they're actually looking at the content of that dust to see what exactly is in it. You know, what are we stopping coming into our house? And I have been monitoring air quality, I can't emphasize enough how important air quality is for general well-being. This is a graph that shows the impact of carbon dioxide on decision-making performance. And I'm thinking about this primarily in relation to school classrooms. But when you start to look at the fact that a lot of school classrooms go above 2,500 parts per million, which is the black dot, and you start to see that really a lot of these functions are below average and even dysfunctional, then no surprise that most of us struggled with double chemistry on a Friday afternoon at school. It's quite not really surprising those afternoons were so painful. This is some real data from a school recently that shows them coming in nice and good air quality coming in, and boom, there it goes above 2,500 by 11 o'clock. And that actually was a rainy day, and that they didn't go out much, and the windows were closed. So it is an issue. We've been monitoring air quality on the streets as well. And this graph Okay, this shows PM 2.5. This really, really shocked me. And this is our house, PM 2.5s in 2019. And it actually shows, it was when we had the really big heat wave last July. And it actually shows that we had the windows open a lot for natural cooling at nighttime. Just by doing that, we made the air quality worse because we were bringing in lots of outdoor air. So all this period we had the MVHR on. But the moment we opened up all the windows, the PM 2.5s went up. Now, there may be other variables in this, so you always have to be careful about jumping to conclusions, but it seems pretty clear relationship there. So this is a nasty. There's a little mini building physics lesson here, which is that little gaps in your ceiling. So this was above my head, a couple of spaces away. So warm, moist air in a house, particularly in a bathroom, is going to be rising up. And if there's a little crack in the plasterboard junction to the ceiling, or a ceiling rose with a whopping great big hole where the electricians sort of smashed through, and there's basically leakage going up, you get constant leakage. So this was the 0.6 U value insulation that's probably been up there for all these years. And basically this was an ever-growing patch of mold in the insulation that was just sort of getting ever bigger because that warm mist air kept leaking into that space. So pretty grim, really. And it's worth remembering that the way that moisture moves in a building is that you get air moving across the top of it, and air enters the house on the side it blows into. So the air is coming, if the wind is blowing this way, the air will come in on this side, and then you'd have the roof, and the air will be blowing over the roof, and then it will create suction on the other side. So it will create suction in the roof, and it will create suction on the other wall. So you'll very often find that there are problems on one side of the building, quite often related to orientation and to wind direction, because air is being pulled out in those locations. So we pulled all the ceiling out and discovered that the way the house was built was that the trussed rafters were put up first, and then plasterboard was put on. Then they built the blockwork walls up to the plasterboard. An unusual way of building. Then that gave a real challenge because then we had to. Hello?
It's 7:45, Harry. Just doing your time check.
Yeah, thank you. So the plasterboard, basically we want to create full air tightness all the way across, wall to wall. And we did that by taping. And we created a complete flat square plane that created total air tightness on the roof. Got some help from this little man. And we got 350 millimeters of insulation in the loft. So I'm going to speed up now because I was getting quite excited there, and I hope it's all been helpful. And so we've got new triple glazing, replacing some really horrible, really leaky double glazing. There's a lovely test of how good your roof insulation is, which is how much frost do you have on your roof. And here we've got lots of nice frost, which shows that we have very little heat leakage into the loft space, whereas the neighbours are very patchy. So we also put solar shading in. I think we have to think about overheating, summer overheating. And we could have spent a few £1,000s on electric blinds, but instead I contacted a sailmaker and we made our own. And they're actually quite beautiful. And basically I rigged them up myself. So we've got inward opening windows, and I basically go sailing when it gets hot. So we just rig up the sails, and it's really quite fun. That's what it looks like from the outside. We put Cork Insulation in, and it was very carefully set out to make sure we didn't have joints overlapping. So we've got all the joints sealed, overlapped. I even set it out on the driveway, and I even reused all the pieces of cork. We've put sensors in the building. We've got little sensors detecting, we drilled a hole in a wall to put a sensor in, and we've been tracking the air quality, the moisture levels within the wall, the hydrothermal performance of the wall. We did lots of watercolor drawings of the project. And I think I'd like to talk about a few challenges. I'd like to talk a little bit about how to balance air tightness and ventilation through the retrofit steps. And I think it's really important to think, how do you do that? And it's just worth remembering that there are windows that have something called a night vent. So you can have the catch rotated 45 degrees to the side, and it will crack the window open by about 3 millimeters. And depending on the size of the window, you can actually get that to roughly match what the trickle ventilation requirement through the building regulations is. So that gives you enough ventilation for your windows before you've put in a ventilation system. Yeah, so it's a nice little trick there. It's actually quite a good interim measure. Quite challenging doing it step by step, you know, taking the curtains off, rehanging the curtains, all that kind of thing. It does need careful sequencing. There is a lot of vacuuming when you do it. You know, you do a Sunday's worth of work, you've got to vacuum up. I tried to get my wife to look really grumpy, but she couldn't do it. So that was her sort of trying to kind of move things around the house. But it can be quite disruptive in terms of storage. It's frustrating that a lot of the natural insulation materials are not locally available. So these did come from Portugal. So there's quite a high transport cost, but actually cork is the lowest embodied carbon insulation material you can use. It's not necessarily the lowest when you consider sequestration. Wood fiber is the lowest when you consider sequestration, but in terms of getting the raw material, cork is the lowest. And then we need to think about moisture landing zones, cold bits of wool that haven't been insulated that become a risk. And I think it needs to be borne in mind. So there is something beautiful about retrofitting your home. You feel really, really comfortable. It's really lovely. You get better air quality. You can be nearer outside walls. It doesn't feel cold or drafty. It's lovely to get close to materials. So I do advocate giving it a try yourselves. It was a great learning experience for my son. I've also shared the house. I've had lots of people from Passivhaus training courses, and also had the house open for open day. We've also done we've leafleted the local area to say, come on, have a go, retrofit your home. And that was a lot of fun. And we also got, we completed a room, which was like a sort of, we've completed a room. And it feels really comfortable. We got into Grand Designs, which was nice, Grand Designs magazine. So they're also thinking that it should be aspirational to retrofit your home. And this is just a little zoom out, just to say, look, we've got to do all of this. Oh, there's so much to do. So I'm gonna whiz through this because I really want to show you something very important, which is about RAFT. And I know it's frustrating to not be able to see everything, but time is calling. So very quickly, I want to tell you about RAFT. RAFT stands for Retrofit Action For Tomorrow. It is my mission to try to make a deeper impact on reducing carbon through retrofit. And I spoke to a head teacher once who said that she felt that she could influence 5,000 people through being a head teacher at a school. And I think that says a lot in terms of what kind of engagement you can get from children and from school communities around the built environment. And I just think children don't think they can change the built environment, and I think they should feel that they can. And I think, so I've basically been taking children into boiler rooms at schools and following the heat from the radiators through the pipework back to boilers and helping them understand building fabric much better. So we developed a little exercise called the Baked Potato Challenge, where they used insulation materials to keep a baked potato warm. We've been retrofitting the school. We just held a zero carbon assembly and had the Mayor of Lewisham and Janet Davey MP attend. This is the school. The orange are the poorly performing buildings. We've produced a zero carbon timeline. So we're going to produce zero carbon buildings by 2024. and then zero carbon school, which is scope 3, which means all the transport and all the food and everything else by 2030. We produced a series of cartoons to help explain the ideas. And then finally, there's a link that I hope Nadia is going to send you, which is a link to 2 films. If you want to watch the assembly, it's the film on the right. But if you just have 4.5 minutes, you can watch a lovely film that was made by a friend on the left, which is about some of the workshops we did with the children. So that's it. Sorry, I had to rush through a bit there. Look forward to hearing some questions.
Thank you so much, Harry. That was really, really good and really interesting. And of course, we have got a load of questions for you to answer. But just on those films, as you said, yeah, I will send them out to your emails after the event. It will probably be tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening that I get them out to you. But yeah, I'll send it out in the same email that I send the link with all the recordings in. So just to go through the questions that we've got. So both Kathy and Tanuja were asking about people outside of Southeast London. So Kathy said that she's applied for the Green Homes grant and she's gone to the contractors on the website and contacted them, but they're all massively overbooked and no one's offering retrofit coordination or an advice service. Are there other community energy groups in West London that can support her? Kathy and Tanuja was also saying that she wants advice for people outside South London. I would really recommend looking on the Community Energy London website and you can find what group is local to you. And if you're outside of London, I would say look at Community Energy England's website because they have a list of groups as well. And of course, there are people like Harry from Retrofit Action For Tomorrow who gets involved in this space, our previous speakers as well, Nick Parsons and James Traynor. You'll find their contact details on the presentation slides that we had, so you can get in touch with them. But Patrick had a question for you, Harry. And it was quite a specific question, so I don't know that you'll be able to get to it right at the minute, but if you do get a chance, maybe you can reply to him later. And he was saying that you mentioned cutting energy demand by about 80% in the 1840s semi-detached house, and he wanted to know what the final consumption of that house was in kilowatt hours per square meter per year. But if you don't have it on your slides, then maybe you can get in touch with him.
Yeah, I mean it was about 200 square meters, so it's 200 times 40 is the space heat demand.
Awesome. Okay. And Claire was mentioning that she's been quoted between £2,500 and £3,000 for an energy assessment. Amar commented he's actually been quoted between £350 and £500. But her question was, is it worth spending money on an assessment when she knows that her 1930s semi-detached house has no loft insulation, no floor insulation, and thin double glazing? Will it tell her anything new?
Well, if she knows that and she's attended this series of courses, then probably not.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she might want to be spending the money more on a bit of further assessment about the building fabric and putting the basic fabric right, and then thinking about what measures would have what effect, and what order to do them in.
Yes, that makes complete sense. So yeah, I would agree. And Claire, of course, I would recommend using the EcoFurb tool, which we'll give you the link to next week. But yeah, if you already have that knowledge, then step by step, and you can always come back for advice on what order to do things in and how you want to do it next. So Ruth was asking, it would be great to find out if double glazing is really worth it.
Yeah. So you know, I'd advocated triple glazing, and I know that there have been some studies that have looked at the amount of glass and the embodied carbon of glass, and some studies have come out that have said actually triple glazing isn't worth doing. And I think you've got to treat it on a case by case. Also, double glazing that isn't just one U value. Yeah, so there's a gap, and there are different treatments to glass, and the gap, generally the bigger the gap is, the better the U value. Sometimes gases, or most of the time gases are put into that gap. Usually it's argon, but it all can be krypton, which has a really, really high embodied carbon. So it's not, double glazing isn't just double glazing. There's a whole range of specs of it, and the same for triple glazing. And there's a lot of the heat loss can actually also be through the frames and through the junction of the frames to the wall. So you've got to think about the whole window. Sometimes people just look at the U value of the glass, for example, as one assessment. But you've got to look at the whole window and how it's installed. So if there's a lot of framing on the window, then the overall U value is going to go down, well, it's going to go up. It's going to be worse. Yeah. So generally, to make triple glazed windows effective, generally you want them to be fairly large and facing south. And of course, you need to think about overheating as well. So.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I think Nick also mentioned in the chat about triple glazing, you will get condensation on the outside, and that's something that you shouldn't be surprised to see if you do.
Yeah, it's really good that Nick's brought that up. You get it. It's quite surprising. People, you basically reversed it all. If it was single glazing, our neighbours have got single glazing, and they've always got condensation on the inside in their bedroom. In the morning, I can see it. And you know, that's because the temperature of that glass has dropped down to the dew point, and the humidity inside the room is condensing there. With windows, it's actually really fascinating. I don't know if Nick knows this, but the parts that the window gets condensation are often lower down, and they're the parts that can see more of the night sky because they've lost, you have long wave radiation. And so sometimes the bits that are higher up that are near the frame, you get a gap. And that gap is because it's not seeing the night sky, so the glass isn't cooling down as much on the inside. And really what's really, so it is a little bit annoying, yeah. It's a little bit annoying, but it does actually go very quickly. So we had some this morning, but it disappeared in about half an hour. So it's not a big deal, but it is still worth knowing, and it's interesting. On skylights, it's awesome. On skylights, when it freezes, you get the most beautiful patterns. I mean, really, it's like I mean, I'd like to do a series of pictures of these, just the freezing and from the night sky.
It sounds amazing. Yeah, that'd be really cool to see.
I mean, just to add, it is worth saying that condensation is a hygrothermal diagram. Yeah, it's actually like a mapping of temperature and moisture. I mean, it's worth, you know, because, you know, we sort of see condensation as like, oh, what a pain. But actually, if you look at it and actually sort of trying to appreciate it, it's actually, it's like raw data there in front of you, telling you what temperature things are and how much humidity there is.
I think that's one of the most both technical and artistic sentences I've ever heard in my life. Very, very cool. Okay. So Pamela also said, thank you so much for the impressive talk. For the average punter, it's very hard to get the technical details right and get architects to come back and monitor how retrofit is working. I'd say, have you got sort of any comments on that, or any comments on the role of architects? I mean, Pamela, I would say I agree with you, especially in the current circumstances. And of course, you can always come and get advice from organizations that are sort of advocates for this kind of thing, rather than people that are doing the work for you, I suppose. But Harry, any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I remember when I was an architecture student, I heard a story about a Portuguese architect who made it a condition of every project that he worked on that he slept in the property for one night, which I thought was a really cool idea. And I think there is something about there's a sort of general feeling about architects that they sort of very often will design something and then they sort of take their pictures and then they're gone. And I told the school that I'm working with at the moment that they need to expect me to be around for about the next 5 to 10 years. Because I actually, you know, I've learned a lot. I've made some mistakes and I've learned from them by going back and by tweaking things and trying to get them right. And, you know, buildings are complex things, and, you know, if you don't go back, you don't learn. So I think you should go back. I mean, obviously there's a fee issue. Yeah, there's a problem of time and money and all that. But there's also love.
So find someone who loves energy efficiency.
Yeah.
So we had a few questions about MVHR, mechanical ventilation, heat recovery systems. And I noticed that we're running a little bit over time, but we will take the last few questions. If you need to drop off at this point, please feel free. Of course, the questions will be on the recording and I'll send that out afterwards as well. But back to, so Black and Green sent in a question, and they're asking, if there's only one person in a house who showers and cooks once a day, does MVHR make sense?
So all of this, so what I haven't done is given a talk about the range of ventilation options available. I've given a talk about my house, and obviously I went through a whole series of decision-making processes to arrive at these decisions. So what I can say is that we've just finished a project on Elephant and Castle Roundabout. There's a building called Metro Central Heights that's a grade 2 listed block of flats with blue panels. It was designed by Erno Goldfinger, and it was originally the Ministry of Health, but then got sick building syndrome, can you believe it? And it was then converted into flats. And so there is actually a single guy in a flat that now has MVHR. And the thing is, you know, I have to say, it's always case by case. You know, there's a lot of different reasons for doing it. One might be just about air quality and just about carbon dioxide. Another might be about reducing PM 2.5s and pollution. So if you imagine he's next to this roundabout with really high pollution, and he's actually got one of these IQ Airs. This is £250 for one of these, and I think they're really great. That you get, there's an app that links to your phone. You can monitor air quality. So for him, there are actually 3 reasons to do the MVHR in this. You know, I don't know how often he showers, but you know, it's one is that he will improve the air. He will reduce the pollution coming into his flat because we'll be filtering the outside air. It's not, the filter doesn't get rid of all of it, but it does some. The second is that he had a really big condensation problem because it's a concrete framed building. There are lots of thermal bridges all over. And so there was condensation forming. And so we wanted to really make sure that we were going to manage the humidity levels in the flat. And his third driver was that he really wanted to reduce his emissions and reduce the heat loss. So amazingly, there are 2 vents in this listed facade that we created this giant trumpet thing connector to connect back to the ducts. And we got it all within a suspended ceiling, and then the MVHR is in the middle of the flat. And we've got MVHR, and I think he is really delighted with it. But I have to say that I don't advocate MVHR for every building, for every site. You know, it's got to be on a case-by-case basis, and you know, it needs a bit of management. You need to change the filters, and you need to check it's still working. So there's a lot of variables, and there's a lot to be said for mechanical extract ventilation, which is a centralized or a decentralized system where you just extract and you allow the natural leakage of the building or controlled leakage through trickle vents or special vents that are humidity sensitive that allow you to ventilate your building. So there's different systems available, but for us, MVHR was the right one.
On that topic, actually, Patrick also was saying that quite a few people are put off by the difficulties of sort of threading MVHR through the house to do a central system. what are the cons, the pros and cons of doing sort of a central system versus a local system?
Yeah, okay. So if the questioner is alluding to centralized MVHR or decentralized MVHR, I have a bit of experience because we're actually installing some decentralized MVHR at the moment. And it's a system called Lunos, or it's a German manufacturer called Lunos, and it's regenerative heat recovery, and they're actually quite small units that go into a wall, and they go in pairs, and one pulls in air whilst the other one extracts air for about 30 seconds, and then they reverse. So you get the heat recovery for 30 seconds only, and then you get the heat being put in for 30 seconds. So that's a really that's a really good system when you are going to really struggle to get that pipe work in. And this is actually in Walter's Way, one of the Walter Siegel houses, where we just couldn't be cutting joists and doing too much work because everything's exposed, and it would have been quite tricky. Now, sometimes you can expose the pipe. Some people like that aesthetic. Sometimes it might work in certain properties in certain buildings, but in this case, it didn't. So in that case, we really felt that decentralized was the right way. It is a pickle, you know. It does. You need to drill holes in things. You're never going to get the perfect building to do MVHR in for retrofit. New build will have easy joists, and you can just pass those pass the MVHR ducts through them as you need, and it can be very easy and flexible. But with retrofit, you're always going to have moments that are tricky. But the radial system, which is flexible, smaller ducts, that means smaller holes, and you can sort of thread them in. Well, I actually found it quite fun. It was kind of like knitting on a grand scale, you know, or sewing or embroidery. It's just, you know, threading it through the house, working it out. It took a while to get it right, but, you know, we found a way.
Okay, and last question on MHVR. Huawei had a question asking, can you wash the filters, or do you have to throw them away? He's thinking about waste and recycling.
Such a great question. You know, like, please get washable filters. I mean, at the moment, I'm not throwing them away. I try to not throw anything away. I've got a bag of metal that I'm collecting. I've got a bucket of metal. I just can't throw even bits of metal away. And at the moment, I'm collecting them all because I want them as a record. So I haven't thrown them, but, you know, I am getting through. I think I'm on about number 6 at the moment. They really should. I think there are some washable ones. I think they really should be doing it. Should be a product that's available.
Okay,
that's a good point.
Yeah, awesome. Good to hear that that question being asked. So a question from Fuad. He is asking, in relation to your troubles of living in a tower block, many of the public like him are entangled in leaseholder or bad freeholder situations, and that limits the horizon of what they can do. At a policy or, you know, sort of government level, what could be lobbied for in future?
Oh gosh, I think that's probably more a question for you, Nadia.
Yeah, I think that is a fair question. There are lots of things going on, I would say, within the energy space around leaseholders or tenants' relationship with sort of electricity and renewable energy and power. I'm not as aware that there has been conversation around actually changing the building fabric and how much power tenants have to do that. What I would say is, if you are a sort of tenant that is renting privately, do get in touch with your landlord, and there are, you know, you could fill out the EcoFurb basic plan, pass it on to your landlord, and say, look, there's a grant that is offering support with this. These are some of the measures that we would suggest might be good to invest in your home with. But I think to some extent this energy efficiency / deep retrofit is really in the early stages of the market being developed, and it should be moved on a lot faster. And I think until it becomes more widespread amongst homeowners, it probably won't be addressed for leaseholders either. But I think linking the value of buildings to the energy efficiency of them is a really important step in making people understand what the actual, making people understand that the carbon emissions reduction should directly link to the monetary value of a building. And then I think sort of big house builders and sort of people that own these buildings will start investing in this, and we've started to see that a little bit through the EPC, the minimum energy efficiency standards coming up, but it's something that's moving really slowly.
Just to say, a few years ago there was a bill looking at freeholders and energy efficiency improvements, and particularly in flats, but it's kind of stalled and then fizzled out in the last 5 years. So it has been sort of thought about before, but hopefully now, that, as Harry said, you know, there's more of a movement to make retrofit aspirational, so that will increase the amount of people looking and wanting and needing this stuff, that these sort of problems, even though they're complex, they have to get sorted out to ensure that, you know, every building in the UK gets retrofitted to an inch of its life, because we've got 8 years to sort this out, basically. So yeah, really interesting question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we've only got time for 2 more questions, and I think let's go with Magda's question. Is using a membrane to make a room airtight a good idea?
To make a what airtight?
To make a room airtight.
A room airtight. Okay. So it depends. Most answers are it depends. It would be nice to know what kind of wall or room that is. We do use membranes sometimes, but they're not the only solution. Plaster on brickwork is a perfectly good airtight layer, with mesh at the edges and with tape to windows. For my ceiling, perhaps you might have wondered, why did I not put a membrane on the ceiling and just use that? Well, I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I have gone to some sites where I've seen holes in membranes where somebody's just lifted a long metal something and just stuck it through. And it's the kind of thing that, you know, you're carrying something and there's somebody else on site who's perhaps not been part of the works, and they just do it and probably don't tell anybody about it. So I think it's quite easy to puncture them. They're quite robust, but they're not, you know, they're not as good as a board, an airtight, a vapor block board. So I think it's a case by case. Sometimes membrane is the right solution, but not always.
Okay, that's that's really good to know. And last question from Alex: what are Harry's 3 top tips for someone who's doing their own retrofit of an average 1960s 3-bed semi?
Gosh, I didn't know there was an average 1960s semi. Is that? I mean, is it a cavity wall? Has it got concrete in it? It's kind of like, you know, in the 1960s they were doing a lot of experimentation. There's quite a few different unusual typologies. I think I would definitely think about where your biggest heat loss areas are. I think you want to be, generally, I like to work top down because it's going to be disruptive to do it any other way. Because if you do the top at the end, you're going to be coming through all the other spaces. So I would certainly start looking at the roof. Really depends. I don't know what kind of roof you've got, so it's really hard to sort of give a top tip in that sense. But you know, the simple thing would be the ceiling or the loft insulation, and then the walls, and then think about replacing the windows. Those would be kind of, you know, obvious first choices. But you know, there's also the ground, and you know, the relationship of the building to the ground. Is it solid ground? Is it a solid slab? Is it suspended? Is it timber? You know, there's so many questions. So it is a bit of a case by case. But maybe if you think back to what I said in the talk, the retrofit ready side of things is really, you must remember that. So maybe your number one should be, is your building moisture robust as it is? Is the basic fabric, the waterproofing from rainwater and the rainwater goods and the damp from the ground, are those all good? And that's a good place to start.
Okay, thank you so much, Harry. That was really, really, really insightful. I think we're going to have to finish off there. The last thing I would like to do is thank both Alex and Jason for co-hosting this and helping us out with both the chat and and getting people in. Also, thanks to Nick, who was one of our previous presenters, and I can see is replying to a lot of things in the chat. I've just posted the link to our website where you can view the recordings, and you can also sign up to next week's event. Next week is the last week. We'll be looking at renewable energy and how you can make your home sort of a mini power station. So it'll be a very exciting one, but we'll all be launching the Future Fit Homes program. So we'll have all the details about costs and services on there. If you want to get in touch with Harry, you will find his email on the presentation slides, which will also be on our website. And yeah, I really hope to see you guys next week. And I will send around all of the links and all of the details to the recordings and the videos that we mentioned earlier to your emails within the next few days.
Can I just ask one last question, just to be really annoying? So John asked me on the chat, what was the simple MVHR system with the 2 small units Harry mentioned? And I was typing at the time and I didn't mentally not log it. So which one was it, Harry?
Yeah, so there's it's called Lunos.
Lunos, L-U-N.
Lunos.
Perfect.
All right, great, thank you.
I did see the reference to the Fresh R system, and there are other systems that are slightly more, slightly more slightly less decentralized. So this is just a unit in a wall, just like we're used to for fans in bathrooms, but the Fresh R is a slightly bigger unit, but still quite slim and quite small.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm glad that that person had their question answered last minute. If anyone else has any more questions, of course, get in touch with us by email. But for now, I think I'll leave it there and thank everyone who's been involved and hopefully see you next week.
Thanks so much, Harry.
Thank you. Thank you. Most welcome.